There was an article that was written in the New York Times magazine, and the article was written by the name of the ethicist, someone called Randy Cohen. So somebody wrote into him, it was a woman, and this woman was signing a contract to rent an apartment, a house, whatever it was, and the real estate agent who she was renting it from, she writes, shocked me, and he refused to shake my hand, stating that he's an Orthodox Jew. An Orthodox Jew do not shake women's hands. I was shocked. I'm so against this. I'm a feminist. I cannot have such a thing. And she wrote into the New York Times magazine with the question, should I terminate the contract? Should I rip up the contract? How can I rent from such a person? How can I do business with a person that doesn't shake women's hands, claiming that they're an Orthodox Jew? That's against women. It's terrible. I can't do a contract like that. What should I do? So this Randy Cohen person who's writing the article in the New York Times magazine writes back, absolutely. It's terribly offensive. It's a horrible action, and you should not do business with them, and you should rip up the contract. That was the article that was written in the New York Times magazine. And the question is it really so bad? Is it a Doraisa? Is it a Drabonon? Is it a Chumrah Midas Chasidus not to do it? Very common shaila. When a person is in the workforce, he's in the office, he's meeting people, he's showing products to people, he's having meetings in various places, they're not, familiar with various practices, and they shake hands. The question is, what am I meant to do? It's embarrassing. Am I meant to embarrass somebody else? Is it really that bad? Is it a Daraisa, Drabona, Midas Chasidus, Chumrah? Let's talk about it. So, it all really starts from the understanding of one pasuk. And the pasuk in Vayikra Yud-Ches tells us, okay? Which we have to understand what that means. Of course, it means not to come close to an erva and get involved in things that you shouldn't be getting involved in, but we have to understand what that pasuk means. So the Mefarshim, Chazal tell us, and they explain the pasuk, like Sikravu is plural, and therefore it includes both the Isser on men and women, that touching for any form of contact, Be'etzem Rashi says, men and women to each other, is forbidden. The Gemara in Shabbos, Gimel Amar Aleph, tells us two opinions. These opinions are as follows. Number one, all forms of contact are an Issa D'Oraisa and fall into the category of this pasuk. And the second sheet of the Gemara is no, only relations are Asa, whereas any other form of contact would be a Durabonon. We'll see how the Rishonim learn Pshat in the Gemara also that way. Rabbeinu Yonah famously, Rabbeinu Yonah brings down in Shari Tshuva Perek Gimel, any form of contact, male and female, is an Issa D'Oraisa. It falls under the category Le'Sikrav U'Legales Erva. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, even if there's a Shaila Pekuach Nefesh, it will not be a Heta. There's absolutely no Heta according to Rabbeinu Yonah, even for medical purposes, doctors, Hatzalah, it's irrelevant. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, it's a very, very serious psak that it falls into the Issa D'Oraisa and must not be transgressed at any cost. The Rambam, famously, and on this Rambam we're going to discuss, the Rambam says that the only Issa of contact between male and female, between men and women, is if it is the derech chibo, right? If it's an affectionate way, if that's the right way of translating derech chibo. But derech chibo means it's done in a loving, affectionate, way, not just a very formal way. According to the Rambam, the Issa over here, the Oraisa, is derech chibo, then it's going to be a daraisa of touching. The Ramban is very, very fiercely choilek on the Rambam, and he holds no. The only thing that says a daraisa l'sikru v'legales erva is actual relations, but anything else, even if it's derech chibo, will be a durabonon, and that's the Ramban loisa say in Sefer HaMitzvah Shenon Gimel Al Koponim. We have over here a major machlokes rishonim, and we also have to ask ourselves the question: is shaking a hand derech chibo or not? I'm going to show someone a product, I'm going to meet someone in an office, they put out their hand, I'm shaking their hand to say, hello, nice to meet you. Is that called derech chibo? Is that affectionate? Is that a loving sort of way of touching? Or is it just a formal way of how people meet, and that's how people sort of get to know each other? Right? That's the question. Number one, is it derech chibo? Number two, whether or not derech chibo is going to be the Issa D'Oraisa. D'Rabbanan, of course, can be mekel in certain situations. So in 1970, Chacham Ovadia Yosef was presented with a prize by the State of Israel, by then Prime Minister Golda Meir, and she extended her hand to Chacham Ovadia Yosef. He obviously did not respond, he didn't put his hand out, and there was a tremendous amount that was written afterwards from the newspapers saying how embarrassing, how can you do that? It's not a polite thing to do when the Prime Minister of Israel extends her hand and you don't respond by shaking her hand. And Ravadia very clearly writes that it's very nice, I hear, but the Torah is much more important than being polite. We'll discuss that in a minute. The Beis Yosef and the Shach have a machlokes how to understand Pshat in the Rambam. The Rambam that we mentioned a few moments ago is subject to machlokes Beis Yosef and the Shach. The Beis Yosef in Yodei Makuf Tzadihei tells us that we want to be machmir, and even if it's not derech chibur, it's an issa d'oraisa. According to the Beis Yosef, and Sfadim, by the way, very makpid on this, especially when it comes to a wife that's a nida, giving birth even, the Beis Yosef, it paskins halacha lemaisa, that even the Rambam will hold that derech chibur is an issa d'oraisa. Right? Even if it's not derech chibur, I'm sorry. Even if it's not derech chibur, it's going to be an issa d'oraisa. The Shach says, and this is an important one, the Shach says if it's not derech chibur, meaning if it's not in an affectionate way, the Shach will hold that it's not even asa. The example the Shach gives is of a doctor that has a patient, and the patient is a woman. You've got a male doctor with a female patient, or vice versa, and the doctor wants to take the pulse of the female patient. The Shach says it's not derech chibur, and if it's not derech chibur, it's not even asa. It's not even a pshat of a d'Rabbanan. The Shach holds that it's absolutely fine. Interestingly enough, Reb Moshe, Nigris Moshe, and Eben Ezer Chedet Beis Simon Yudalid, Me'ika Hadin goes with the Shach and wants to be mekel again. Me'ika Hadin, we'll see in a moment what he actually holds, that you could be mekel in such a case. So we have over here a bit of a confusion. D'oraisa, d'Rabbanan, yes derech chibur, not derech chibur, lemaisa. Let's see what the Das HaPoskim is. Is it mutter or is it asa to shake a woman's hand? Of course, we're discussing this in a situation of a business, not for a situation of friendship. So Rabbeinu Yonah, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, there's nothing to talk about. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, there's nothing to talk about. I don't care if it is derech chibur or not derech chibur. It doesn't make a difference. Contact between male and female is forbidden. A shayla of a d'oraisa, an issa d'oraisa, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, must be avoided at all costs. That's Shitas Rabbeinu Yonah. The Stei Chabed, that's quoted in the Oitza Poskim, says only when it's being done for medical treatment, that's when it will be a situation where it could be okay. In other words, a doctor, Hatzalah member, or something similar, then the Stei Chabed says, which is what we saw previously from the Shach, there's a mokim to be mekel. But if it's not being done for a medical treatment or something similar to that, where it's absolutely necessary, then the Stei Chabed said that it's asa. Now, Reb Moshe, in that tshuva that I quoted before, Me'ika Din may go like the Shach, but he actually writes, you should be machmeh. He writes very clearly, do not judge anyone that's mekel. Anyone that's mekel, don't judge him. Don't judge him, because there's what to be so mechon. But Rav Moshe writes that how do you know what's going on in the guy's head? How do you know the hirurim that's going on b'shas maisa? How do you know the pleasure that he may be deriving b'shas maisa when he has the ability to shake this woman's hand? And therefore, since we don't know what's going on, and a person has to know himself very badly, and therefore Rav Moshe says you should actually be 100% machmir in this case, even though again, there are those who are makel, he quotes them, and he says, those that are soymech on that, don't judge them, but if other Rav Moshe's psak is lemaisa, one should not do it, because who knows what it can lead to, who knows the hurim b'shas maisa. She's a very pretty woman, that a person gets a certain geschmack from that, certain pleasure from that, and therefore Rav Moshe says it shall not be done. Binyamin Zilber Zatzal in Oz Nidbru also has a tshuva to be machmeh. The Ben Ish Chai also called a handshake derech chibur, and he says, and he quotes even a Sefer Chasidim, this is in Od Yosef Chai in Parashat Shoftim, the Ben Ish Chai said, absolutely, it shall not be done, even at the cost of embarrassing somebody else. It doesn't make a difference. The Ben Ish Chai quotes the Sefer Chasidim, that is absolutely machmeh. So is machmeh the Debet Sin Ravim Ben Moshe Chelet Dalet Simachov Lamed, the Minchas Yitzchak in Chelet Kei Simachov Zayin, River Voice Ephraim, and many others as well. In fact, Ramot Chelio, a former chief rabbi of Israel, was actually one time in England, and he was invited to meet the Queen of England, and she extended her hand to the chief rabbi, or then the chief rabbi of Israel. Now, even though there were a lot of cameras there, a lot of press going on, he didn't, obviously didn't respond, and he did not put out his hand. Afterwards, he received a letter from Buckingham Palace to say, we're terribly sorry, because generally the protocol is that the Queen does not shake hands of any rabbis. So it must have been a mistake, there must have been a lack of communication or something similar to that, because that's something that generally does not happen. Reb Menashe Klein in Mishnah Halachos Chelek Dalet Simon Kuf Chav Gimel is also machmir, brings Reb Moshe, and he agrees to Reb Moshe, and he says at the end of the day, when you got a woman there, you don't know a person's hirhurim, you don't know his thoughts, you don't know what's going on, and therefore Einach Hanami, there were people, he writes, in Germany and in France that were very makel, like the Shitas and Mekilim, and would allow it to be happen, and they're relying on the shach that it's not considered to be derech chibur. L'maisa, he says, you should be machmir even if it causes someone to be embarrassed. And the reason he says to be machmir is, number one, many poskim are cholik on the shach. Number two, maybe the shach would be maskim because the shach was makel by a medical situation of a doctor. Beseda, shaking hands at a woman in an office, maybe the shach wasn't even talking about, so you haven't even got the shach to be soymechon in that case over there. Then he quotes also stammers where a person starts with a handshake and who knows what it can end with. Are there any mekilim lemaisa in this sugya? Is it shaykh to find mekilim who actually are psak halacha lemaisa to be mekel? So actually there are a few, and of course it's based on the shach we mentioned before. One of the rabbonim that are mekel is a rav of Shlomo Karlebach, who was a rav in Germany from 1845 to 1919, and he writes lemaisa like this. He says there's a mokum to be mekel simply because, and obviously discussing only this case, where it's going to humiliate or embarrass somebody else. So he quotes the famous Gemara in Brachos we've all learned, Brachos Yud Testament base, where the Gemara tells us, and Memele, he wants to be mekel because if and only if it's going to embarrass someone, then there is a mokum to be mekel in that case. Reb Chaim Berlin, who was the oldest son of the Netziv, he was the big Rav in Russia, and then eventually here in Yerushalayim. So he quotes a Gemara in Brachos Daf Samach Aleph Omad Aleph that talks like this. The Gemara says about handing money from men to women, or vice versa, right? Handing money from men to women in order to look. The Gemara says if a person hands money to a woman in order to look at her fingernails, to look at her hands, right? It's a terrible, terrible aveira, and who knows what can happen to him. What does he say? Zuk Reb Chaim Berlin. You see that at the end of the day, intentions are bad, meaning why did you give her money to look at? To look at her hand, that's how it's bad. But if I'm simply shaking her hand in an innocent thing, I'm not doing it to look at her hand or to enjoy, he wants to be mekel in that case over there, providing a person has no bad thoughts. By the way, very interesting Gemara that he brings, because he's bringing a Gemara of handing money. Say that handing money is one thing, you're talking about actually holding the woman's hand. It's an interesting shaykhs that he brings that Gemara, but that's a different thing. There were other Rabbonim as well in America. There are definitely Rabbonim. Herschel Schechter Shlita also held that there's a mocker Jamaica, but he held it should be like a fish grip, right? It shouldn't be like a hard gishmaka grip. It should be like just whatever it is, just to get out of it in that case. There are, by the way, as we see, most poskim are machmeh, and a person has to know himself, of course, and therefore a person has to make gedorim, like the Ritva says in the end of Masechtas Kedushin. But al kaponim, there are eitzes. For example, one of the eitzes is keep your hands full, right? Have your hands full of the brochures, have your hands full of what your computer, your bag, so I can push it, walking in with my bags. I can't do it. So there was actually one woman that she was always makbid to be careful from this. So whenever she went to meet potential customers, she made sure that she was holding like two bags, one with a laptop and one with like a briefcase, and of different things. This way she's like, so one guy was like, oh, it's okay, no problem. And he goes and gives her a big bear hug instead of the handshake, because you can't give me a handshake, so I'll give you a bear hug. But I'll go upon him. Rav Victor Miller, if I'm not mistaken, Rav Victor Miller Sassal used to tell people when a woman would shake and extend her hand, he would say, my wife doesn't allow me to shake very pretty women's hands. That's what Rav Victor Miller apparently used to say in that case. But Rabbi said the greatest eitzah is for a person to be honest and say, my religion doesn't allow it. And if they see that you stick up for your religion and you believe in what you're saying and you hold for what you're saying, they very much respect the person that does that. The Rebbeinu Shem should give us siyat d'shmaya to keep these halachas, know these halachas. Be'ez Hashem, new topic, Mitzvah Hashem next week.